Go. So what physical challenges do you face in a day-to-day routine at college?
For the students?
Or for you personally?
Like, to work with the students?
Working with the students. It's things like, obviously, moving around the college. So if you've got students in wheelchairs, it's working out if your timetable's in a class that's, like, for example, the kitchen, which is upstairs, how are you going to get them up and down, that kind of thing. So it's being aware of where the fire safe points are, making sure that they've got lift access, or you've got a staff member who's got lift access, hygiene rooms, that kind of thing, making sure that you're accessible to those. We're really lucky here in Suffolk One because there are lots of accessible toilets, so it does make life easy, so you don't have to necessarily take someone from P201 all the way downstairs and all the way back up. They can literally just go around the corner, so that makes life a lot easier. The rooms aren't necessarily geared to having lots of wheelchairs in a classroom, and often with students who've got physical difficulties, they will come with equipment, so it's often not just the wheelchair. It might be a standing frame, it might be a walker, it might be crutches, so it's how you get that equipment safely stored so it's then not a risk to all the other students as they move around the classroom. And you might have a classroom of 15 students plus the wheelchair, which if you think about your classrooms with you guys in, it's cramped enough without then a wheelchair and a standing frame and crutches and everything else to worry about. So from that point of view, sometimes you have to really think carefully about the layout of the classroom, where you're going to put that student so they can still take part in what's going on, they don't feel isolated, but equally everyone else can do their job and move around the classroom.
Yeah. So, basically that's my next question, so that's alright. Shall I ask about that one? Yeah. Do you feel like the college has put enough funding towards the students
with physical difficulties or disabilities generally? Just
for the facilities that are provided for them, and like the one-to-one students. So both, really. I
think we're really lucky here. We're a lot more inclusive than a lot of colleges. If you go to sort of some of the other colleges in Ipswich, the sort of special needs department or the foundation learning department is like an add-on. It might be at the back of the building, it might be sort of a porter cabin with a ramp and that kind of thing. Whereas here, they have thought, when they built the college, they did think about the fact that actually it is going to be inclusive, it is going to have students with physical disabilities. The students can get into all the classrooms, the doors are wide enough, you don't have to sort of worry about, you can't get the wheelchair through. They can get into the classrooms, they can access the canteen without any problems. Even the sports hall and the mudguard, they're all accessible from that point of view. And equally, the architects obviously thought about the personal care needs of students who are in wheelchairs. So we've got the sort of changing rooms for students who need that level of support. And like I said, there's lots of, there are lots of, on every floor in every block there are accessible toilets, if not more than one. So I think from that point of view we are really, really lucky. In terms of the learning support, all the students come with a support plan, a statement of special needs, if you like, that identifies how much support they should have. Very few of our students need one-to-one support all the time for everything they do, but they might need one-to-one support, or even some of them need two-to-one support, so 2 adults to one student. If they're in a wheelchair and need hoisting for personal care, that kind of thing, then we have to factor in the fact that actually that's two staff out of a classroom while that student's being supported. Or if they're going on a trip, again, sometimes that's usually when students need more support, because the level of risk increases. If you're out in the community with a wheelchair, what happens if it's a motorised wheelchair? Does it have enough charge? Is it suddenly going to break down when you're at Chantry Park? So those things do require usually an extra level of staffing.
Emotionally, do you feel that you can get attached to students?
And is it like a challenge sometimes, like to detach, like unattach yourself? Because I suppose it must be like sometimes really difficult.
Because the one-to-one care is always there.
Yeah.
So
I think it's like, as a teacher, it's one of those things that you learn kind of how to disassociate yourself from all the needs as you sort of get more experienced. I think with students with special needs, there's some, you know, particularly some of the students who have really complex needs, there is a risk of, you know, you almost do feel kind of like, oh well, you know, take him home, or you know, I want him to be okay. And you do sort of get that, you do find that level of emotional attachment sometimes. But I think, you know, professionally, I've certainly learned to kind of, it sounds horrible, it sounds really harsh, but you do learn to disassociate yourself, and you kind of go, well, yeah, that's my job. It's not my home, they're not my family. You know, it's like any student, they have difficult times, they have times where they're well, there's times when they're not so well. You know, there's times when there's things going on at home, probably like you guys, and your teachers may not know all of that, and then some of them may know more than others, and it is that kind of, actually, this is my professional line. So it's one of, you know, I'm not a carer, I'm their teacher, so you kind of do have to find that professional level. It is hard, you know, because everyone always feels sorry for kids in wheelchairs and who've got needs and life-threatening conditions and things. But it's professional.
So how would you say it differs from taking them outside of college? Like, what challenges would you say it increases?
The challenges are all, if you've got students in wheelchairs or any kind of learning difficulty, obviously you've got to, I could take, you know, if I was teaching you guys, I could just say, right, we're going down to LD, you know, we're going to walk down, fine, no problems, we'll walk back. Don't really have anything to consider, because you're probably, you know how to cross a road. You know all those things. I could probably take you out on my own. In fact, I could probably send you down to LD and say, right, meet me back in 10 minutes. As soon as you put the learning difficulties into that, you've got the levels, you know, you've got things, the fact that they then become more vulnerable because they may not have the road safety awareness, that kind of thing. You've got the fact that actually they're going to need support. Maybe if you ask them to buy something, they're going to need support to do that, because they might not necessarily, you know, you might say, well, here's £5. Probably doesn't mean a lot to a lot of the students, particularly the ones with the more severe learning difficulties. They can physically hand over a £5 note at a till and put their hand out to get money, but actually it doesn't mean anything. So you've got that sort of element to consider. So they're going to need one-to-one support to do that kind of thing. If you're then taking wheelchairs out as well, you've then got how am I going to get from here to Aldi or here to Tesco's? Is it a motorised wheelchair? Are there safe crossing places? If it's a manual wheelchair, you've then got to consider who's going to push it. So, which all our staff are manual handle, they're trained to push wheelchairs, but you know, you've got to look out for your staff as well, because not, you know, a lot of students aren't necessarily light, they're not little kids, they are adults. So going down to Tesco's is fine, but coming back you've got a hill. So
you have to take everything into consideration.
You've got to consider all those kind of things, and so generally your staffing levels would increase as you go up. If you were going to go into town on the buses generally will only take up to 2 wheelchairs or pushchairs. So if there's a parent on there with a pushchair and you've got 2 wheelchairs waiting to go on, that's 2 different buses. So it's those kind of things.
There's so much to take into consideration.
And if you then have students who've got maybe life-threatening conditions, epilepsy, that kind of thing, you've then got to, have you got the right medication? Is wherever you're going accessible to an ambulance in case you need to call an ambulance? So the risks increase, and you do have to, as a teacher taking them out, you have to be responsible for all those things. So it's not just, right, let's go to Tesco's today.
Do you think that sometimes can like emotionally drain yourselves?
It is hard work. It is, you know, it's really rewarding going out, and the students get a lot more from going out than they do a lot of the time from just sitting in a classroom. And it is much more real life. They're being, you know, they are able to experience things that happen in the real world. But as it, you know, it is really draining. You have so much that you have to consider. That it's the planning beforehand that goes on in order for that to happen. And then when you're out, you might only be out for a couple of hours, but you are constantly making sure everyone's okay and the right staff with the right student and everyone's where they should be, nobody's run off. So it is, you know, you come home, it's like, okay, I'm actually exhausted. You might only been out for a couple of hours. So yeah, it's a good, you know, a really good question.
In your opinion, what would you say the biggest challenge you face, like day to day, is by working with like vulnerable people?
I think the biggest challenge is making what I do relevant to them.
Okay.
Because, you know, we have to teach English, we have to teach maths, we have to teach vocational studies, independent skills. So it is making what they're learning relevant to their future. So it's kind of knowing what that future is likely to be. You know, are they likely to be able to be living independent, having some kind of job? Are they only ever going to be in sort of supported accommodation, we're doing as much as they can independently, or are they going to be completely dependent on people for the rest of their life? So it's knowing that and then making what you do relevant. It's no good doing a job application form with a student whose needs are so complex that they're never going to do a job application form. But you might encourage them to think about activities that they'd like to do in a supported environment, and being able to communicate those needs and those wants and making their own choices. That's a big thing that we try to work on, is getting students to make their own choices at whatever level they are at. You know, you guys don't like people telling you what to do all the time, and it's exactly the same for our students. It's so easy to say, well, John wants to go here, but actually, have you actually asked John what he wants to do? Maybe he actually wants to go out on the mugger and play football, regardless of the fact whether he's in a wheelchair or not. You need to give him that choice, rather than just going, well, you know, he'll be fine in there. It's very easy. Yeah. It's very easy to do, but it's taking that sense of worth away from that student. So it's that making everything relevant.
Okay.
Thank you. Everything. Thank you.
Fab. Great.